just a quick overview of myself. I've been living in Southeast Asia for almost the past 6 years, primarily in Cambodia and Vietnam, and most of that time with Hagar International, which I'll be talking about today. So the slide I have up is called the River of Life. It's a tool, a psychotherapy tool using creative arts that's used in Hagar's shelter programs. It's used by a facilitator and a counselor for women to kind of visually portray their life, their journey, and it's used for us to have a better sense of where they're coming from, and for them to feel kind of a part of that journey, so that they can transition it forward and craft it in the way they want. Because most often in cases of trafficking or domestic abuse, which are most of the clients we work with, there's definitely a sense of powerlessness and disconnection from their past. And in the same light, I want to present a little bit of our work, because we've been in the social enterprise world since the mid-90s. As the founder of Hagar likes to say, we were doing social enterprise, and he didn't know he was a social entrepreneur until Schwab gave him an award and said he was. So we have a long history of doing this. We have lots of failures, lots of lessons learned, and I'm happy to share any of those. But to give a quick overview, Hagar was founded in 1992 in Cambodia by a Swiss national. He was visiting, had been living in Japan as well as Singapore with his family, set up a homeless shelter there. And one of the things that struck him about 1992 in Cambodia was the plight of women in Cambodia who were fleeing the violence of the Khmer Rouge and other internal conflicts in the countryside. And so he was particularly moved by this and originally set up a shelter, really just kind of emergency shelter for women who were fleeing, whether it was conflict or domestic abuse, you name it. That eventually came into being what we have today, which is a full-service psychotherapy, counseling services, protection services for women who are either been sex trafficked, domestically abused, victims of acid attacks, really any other extreme version of human rights abuses. We tend to work with other groups, other nonprofits in this field, and be the umbrella. So we like to say that we work with the 1% who can't be helped by other clients or helped by other nonprofits. We currently have operations in the ground in Cambodia and Vietnam and Afghanistan. Like I said, we started in Cambodia in the early 90s. We expanded to Vietnam and Afghanistan in 2008 when we were relatively new. And the clients and the circumstances are nuanced for each country. Happy to answer questions about that. In Vietnam, it's primarily ethnic minorities. In Cambodia, we're dealing mainly with children, victims of pedophilia, as well as Vietnamese who have been either sold or somehow trafficked into Cambodia. In Afghanistan, we deal with a lot of women who have been trafficked into Afghanistan from Saudi Arabia, Iran, and other countries, but increasingly working with young boys as well as women who are victims of domestic abuse and rape and other pretty extreme forms of violence. In Afghanistan, it's quite challenging given their circumstances and their protection under the law, and as well as the local culture and kind of religious practices around abuse of women. And so the part I'm going to talk about today is really a core component of this model is that we have the economic empowerment sphere, because I think what the founder of Hagar realized quite early on is that it's all well and good to set up a shelter which provides immediate protection and the counseling and psychotherapy services so that women can kind of be able to face and deal with the past trauma. But unless they have some sort of economic means, they're not going to move out of the shelter. And so since the mid-90s, Hagar set up a number of its own businesses. They've moved on from very small cottage level, socially oriented businesses to for-profit commercial, pretty highly scaled businesses. So I'm just going to go through a few of those right now. So the first they set up one of the first they set up in 1998 was a catering business. The idea came to Pierre when he was recognizing the garment factories being set up in Cambodia. The workers were typically coming outside eating pretty low quality meals off the street and paying a relatively high price. And so he set up kind of a cooperative with the different women, the shelter, with very nice looking food carts, and they sold rice and other meals to factory workers. And he eventually came up with the idea of pitching this to garment factory owners themselves to provide free meals to their staff. And so it was like an industrial catering business. Starting in, oops, sorry, I skipped ahead. Starting in 2000, they fully commercialized it into a industrial catering and facilities management company. It's a leading company as such in Cambodia, servicing over 30 different locations around the country and providing roughly 30 to 50,000 meals a day to clients like the U.S. Embassy, Raffles Hotel, Intercontinental Hotel, and so forth. We have a restaurant that's really kind of there for show, just to show our clients, our business clients, what kind of level of quality we can offer. Most of our catering is done on site for employees working for that business. So it's a great model for us. It's been sustainable and profitable ever since, providing great benefits to our employees. Our second business was a soy milk business, which was originally, again, designed as a means for women to generate income for themselves and their families. It was a push cart business where women would produce fresh soy milk and sell it locally. They eventually scaled it up into a full beverage manufacturer using Tetra Pak. Still the only one that exists in Cambodia at this point. Then exporting or selling throughout the country, working with World Vision, WHO, and other major international organizations to produce also malnutrition products. This business ended up failing for a number of reasons, which I'm happy to talk about in questions, but it had pretty impressive growth for a while, at one point employing about 130 persons and doing turnover of about $700,000 a year in sales. And then the third and the final business we created ourselves was originally started as a handicraft business. Women in the shelter, 12 women in the shelter creating handicrafts for export to Europe. This is eventually scaled up into a fair trade certified garment factory employing about 140 persons at its peak and approaching sales revenue of about $500,000. We were doing cut, make, trim orders for Marks and Spencer's, Guyam, and other high-profile manufacturers in the U.S. Again, this business we ended up selling or spinning off and selling to one of our key customers in Oceania because it didn't quite make sense for us from a social mission perspective. And happy to get into that as well. Moving on, our final business, and this is a little bit different, starting in 2008 when we looked at expansion to Vietnam and Afghanistan, there were two countries, but Vietnam in particular, that had a private sector already in development. And so we didn't seek at that point to start our own business. We were looking for an investment in a business that was already successful and was looking to be maybe more socially minded. We came across a business called Joma Bakery Cafe. It was started in Laos in 1994. It had 2 outlets. It was always had a pretty strong commitment to people and planet around it, employing disadvantaged persons, donating 2% of sales revenue to local projects, which is inspired by Patagonia and North Face and other bigger companies and the like. And in 2008, when we met with them, they were looking to expand throughout Southeast Asia, looking for additional investment. And at the same time, really liked the work Hagar had done with catering and our other businesses, meshing the social mission with private sector competence. And so we came together, formed a joint venture with 3 other investment funds and Hagar as a shareholder, and created Joma International, which is now operating outlets in Laos, Vietnam, and starting in about a month or 2, opening in Cambodia and Thailand. So it's kind of similar to Panera, a step above Costa, I'd say, in the UK. They produce cafe items, salads, sandwiches, everything's produced in-house, croissants, you name it. And I had the pleasure of leading this for 2 years in Vietnam as they worked out some kinks in the model and we're opening new cafes there. So at its peak, Hagar Social Enterprise Group had 6 different investments. I've talked about 4 of them. We also were doing some work in water and sanitation, and we have a startup in Afghanistan, which we're still kind of getting to the point where it's investment ready. As it currently exists, we're focused primarily on our catering business, which we still have a minority shareholding in. That's scaled up quite significantly in the past 2 years. as well as our Joma investment, which I just said is expanding throughout Southeast Asia. We have a solar investment that's coming along in Afghanistan. We'll see how that starts to develop. To kind of go into how the model works, I'll just use Joma as a case study. Joma was started, as I said, in 1994, always had a strong commitment towards the environment around it, contributing back to society, but also, I think more importantly for us, a very strict orientation to providing a real value to customers. If you look at any of the kind of reviews of Joma online, you look at any of our branding, you don't really see anything about the partnership with Hagar. It's very much oriented as come here because you want, Western-style cafe atmosphere, high-quality products, and great Arabica organic fair trade coffee. So in our branding, our value proposition has really nothing to do with the partnership with Hagar. But on the inside, we've done quite a bit of job or quite a bit of work working with different stakeholders to kind of flesh out what exactly in the social value does this provide to Hagar. And this is an internal, the Joma way. This is kind of the way we describe this to our employees and get buy-in for what we're trying to do. And so we got a lot of this focuses on kind of, okay, we're trying to create value for customers. We're trying to ensure that we're competing in the market and doing, being the best that we can. At the same time, we have this kind of mantra that everything we do, we're trying to improve lives. And part of that is working with Hagar. We invest heavily in training systems, in different ways for women who are coming from Hagar shelters to come in, whether as an intern or initially or as a full-time employee, learn the skills they need to progress quickly in the company. And that's really how we manage, or how we see our social value, is that women start out typically as the lowest level kitchen employee, and what we're looking at is how quickly and they can progress within the company and then out of the company. So it really serves as a first step for women into the market. The way this happens at Joma is that a woman will typically start as an intern. She'll start as a cleaning position, receive training over a period of 1 to 3 months. We provide English lessons, daycare, a number of other benefits that help ease, the transition into full-time employment. And then over that time, she has a mentor and a coach, as well as a traditional supervisor in the business. And she'll eventually progress into a full-time kitchen role, and as she picks up more English, hopefully into cashier, barista, and higher-level roles. We work with other partners around Hanoi and in Cambodia and so forth in the private sector, so that when they've kind of received this basic hospitality training, we're happy for them to move on to the Hyatt or Hilton or other high-end hotels where their earning potential is a lot higher, and the brand name will get them quite far as they seek to develop a career in hospitality. To give you some idea, our baristas are pretty awesome. So we try to make it a fun workplace. Again, it's not if you've been in developing countries, there are often many cafes that kind of have a social mission, and that's really first and foremost. We are really trying to provide a high-quality product. And so, again, you walk in the cafe, you won't see anything about the Hagar partnership or investment. It's really about, getting good coffee, the relationship you have with the barista who you walk in the door and Shirdi is preparing your beverage and knows what you want. And I think the market's reacted very positively. As in this slide here, it's just showing we've been consistently rated in the top 10 restaurants, top 15 restaurants on TripAdvisor in Hanoi. In Laos, I think we're typically bounce between 1 and 3, 1 and 5. We've rated best cafe a number of years in a row in Laos and in Vietnam. And so again, we're very much focused on the quality of the product we're providing, but in the background, how do we improve our organizational culture and our training systems so that women are coming in and receiving real training and a real opportunity to kind of get a first step into the labor market. And so that's really, in a nutshell, what we do. Happy to take specific questions about it, and I'm very happy to talk about also our failures in it.
How do you remain competitive through, for example, Joma, which seems to do that very well, which seems to be able to deliver the quality that people need at, I suppose, still a competitive price? while still trying to get as many people out of the dire situations that you're trying to pull them out of? How do you combine those things?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think our specific, goal and our specific scope is very narrow, because we're not dealing with, say, commercial sex workers where there are thousands and thousands and thousands at any given time in any given city, you name it. We're dealing with really the most marginalized, most severely abused persons, and so the numbers we're talking about aren't massive. In Vietnam, you might be looking at anywhere from 8 to 10 women a month maximum, and so the business capacity to provide internships and full-time jobs is quite reasonable, because you have in any company with say 150 to 200 persons, they're going to have pretty standard turnover in that period, which allows you to kind of stabilize what your hiring is going to be. So it actually works well for the business because it gives them a predictable labor pool from which to train and to hire people. We would have that problem if we had a wider scope for who we were wanting to employ. At the same time, we do work with over 40 different private sector companies. We have very good relationships. So some women, it doesn't make sense for them to go to JOMA because maybe they have a different career aspiration. Maybe they already have, say, a master's degree or they have a higher education level. And so we do work with other partners. So depending on really each client's case, depending on the business, we try to find and balance, the different options. So for instance, if JOMA doesn't have any full-time employment opportunities available, we can always go to the Hilton, see if they pass, their initial test. We can always go to Intercon, any of our other partners. We really try to position JOMA and catering and our other investments is that, kind of the umbrella. So if there's no other option, JOMA and catering will always be there as a employer and trainer of last resort.
Okay. Clear answer. How do you? What's the path after working in one of your enterprises? You sketched a very clear path of starting at the very basic entry jobs and getting a development path with a mentor inside your companies. What about after that? Where do these women and children typically go after they've walked that path?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think with the women and men, I mean, for all the businesses, they have to be at whatever the local labor law is. I think in Cambodia, I think it's 17, and in Vietnam, it's 18 or 19. Basically, they started at JOMA, I think for the harder cases, especially if they're, say, illiterate and an ethnic minority, which carries different stigma and language issues, they will probably stay at JOMA for quite a long time and not be ready to move on to somewhere outside for perhaps even years. So that's an area where we can have a bottleneck. With other women and men, they'll probably move on relatively quickly. They'll stay in JOMA or catering for a year, and then they'll move on to another hospitality-related business. And we have career advisors in each country who meet with the women and men on a kind of a stable schedule. So in the beginning, it's more frequent as they transition to work, and as time moves on, it becomes only monthly or bi-monthly or every 6 months. And so if somebody has kind of an interest to switch jobs or something else, there's always a career advisor there to help them through that stage. We've had women, for instance, go from JOMA, move on to the Hilton, and then move up within the Hilton. That's happened 2 or 3 times in Hanoi. We've had women who moved on to start their own business. 2 women from JOMA who spent about a year and a half at JOMA, and then moved on and started their own housekeeping and cleaning, and food making business for expats. So it really depends on the woman. For our end, we're just trying to get them that first step that allows them to then kind of take control of their own, economic lives.
Okay, great. I was wondering how the group, the Hagar Social Enterprise Group, is being financed, because it seems to me that your investments, the companies that you invest in and that you set up, like for example Joma, they are self-sufficient, but the group and especially the services that you provide, how are those paid for?
Sure. So the group itself was originally established via, all the businesses themselves originally were established via some donation through Hagar, and that was done with the understanding from individuals that they wanted to give money towards something that would then give money back to the NGO and kind of be a pool of funding that ideally was invested properly and gave back dividends. And so the original seed capital for all of these investments for starting these businesses came via donors with that kind of mindset from the U.S. and Europe. Our goal with Hagar Social Enterprise Group is that I think we need about one or two more investments to make this fully sustainable. As it stands now, the dividends and we receive a percentage of revenues as a donation every year to cover these overhead expenses. But in the long term, we're hoping as these investments mature a little bit, especially as Joma comes online in multiple more countries, that the group itself will be profitable and sustainable to cover all these activities. As it stands now, we're only about 60% funded from our investments, but I expect in the next 2 years, even if we don't complete any other investments, it'll be up to 100%. And if we do complete some other investments from our our current funding, then it should be there where we're actually being profitable and able to make more investments off of that increasing fund.
Great. Antoine, I'd like to pull you into the call as well. Do you have any questions for Tim?
Yeah, for sure. Like, to bounce back on the last thing you said like the original financing was about donation. And how did you communicate with these donors at the beginning? Because I think a lot of people will be interested in raising capital, and donation is one of it. So what was like your technique in order to get these donors?
Yeah, a lot of it predated me by a few years, but I think in the mid-90s the concept of social enterprise was in its infancy, and impact investing didn't exist at all, at least not nearly in the form it does today. So I think the founder Pierre, who's a Swiss national, who really knew everybody, would work with everybody, was very good at networking and kind of casting and selling a vision. He came from a background in business, and that's where his connections were. So I think when he started kind of floating this idea of, we want to create businesses that will employ and give women an income, and that will be sustainable and will follow commercial rigor, because I think he saw in Cambodia especially, you have a lot of kind of fake businesses that are nonprofits, but they're not, if they didn't sell their social mission or their social value, they wouldn't survive. It's really, people are kind of buying out of pity, or they're accepting a lower quality product. And so I think when he kind of provided that vision of what could be, especially business persons kind of latched on and said, that makes sense to me. I think in today's market, it's great, and it's interesting, and it's shifted a little bit because now there's a sense and a means to do so. People are saying, well, I don't really want to donate so you guys can do it. I would rather, myself invest in a social enterprise. And so the communication becomes a little bit different. And when we have to, look for donors to fund something like this, it becomes more about, well, what stage are we at in our growth, and where do we want to go, and why does it make sense to donate instead of, having you as an investor in something like this. But that said, for specific investments, we've pulled in individual investors, we've pulled in other social venture capital funds, and we've pulled in venture capital funds to make these things work. We're pretty agnostic about where the money comes from and who our partners are, so long as the vision's aligned and that people, really want to buy into what we're doing. And I think that's, to more directly answer your question, I think the key is really articulating what the theory of change is and, why you are the guys to do it. And I think now it's because you have a lot of conferences, a lot of buzz around this impact investing and social enterprise, it's getting harder and harder to sift out what's real, what's not, and so I think communicating what your track record is, communicating what you already have is quite important, because a lot of people have ideas, but few people have really done things, let alone take them to the scale. So I think that's a key kind of differentiating factor.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually to see that it all comes to a philosophy that you have to share, your philosophy about your business, and also about like this, and I think it's kind of a duality, but at the end, like social entrepreneurs are managing it really well. Is it kind of, I want to provide like a high quality product, but at the same time, I'm providing it to people that are like either like poor or that need it or that can benefit from it. So I think it's really interesting to see this duality. And from Hagar perspective, like you are a really diversified organization. And how do you choose to enter a specific business? Because you are in catering, soy milk, in Joma coffee. And so what are the conditions for your organization to enter a specific business? And what are the key success factors you want to achieve?
Yeah. So I mean, I think originally it was quite opportunistic and entrepreneurial. I mean, when the soy milk business and the garment business and the catering business were set up, it was really the founder Pierre kind of seeing a market opportunity or a market failure and saying, hey, we can make this into a business. Because at the time in the mid-90s in Cambodia, there really wasn't much of a private sector. There was still conflict even in the capital Phnom Penh. And so there was really no economic opportunity for women, let alone those who had come with some stigma about being a single mother or raped or other things. And so really it was very much just entrepreneurial, kind of grit. This is an opportunity, let's do it, and I think we can run it and run it well. In retrospect, and now that we have kind of the infrastructure in place, the organization has grown, and we have the capacity to step back and be a little bit more strategic. What we're looking for in an investment is first and foremost is a business opportunity that is going to create relevant and high quality training and employment opportunities for women. If you look at the soy milk business, it's a good business. I mean, there's absolutely an opportunity for it in Cambodia, and I mean, you're also providing a secondary impact in terms of nutrition and the ability to produce some pretty amazing products for severely malnourished individuals. So as a social business, there's an opportunity there, but from a Hagar perspective, when you're running a beverage manufacturing facility, you really want to have very few employees. The jobs are quite menial, and there's not much room for career progression, even within the business or outside. I mean, the skills you learn from working there don't really translate elsewhere in the private sector. And so in today's Cambodia, that investment really makes no sense, and that's why we decided to sell it off to another investor who wanted to focus and grow it in a different way. So I mean, we're happy that somebody kind of wants to, somebody wants to take it and make it into the great nutrition company that it can be. From a Hagar perspective, in terms of training and employment, it doesn't make sense for us. And so that's really kind of where the bottom line comes. And then second, we're looking for a business that actually solves a real market need, can be fully sustainable and commercial and grow. And likely the business is going to grow much faster than our capacity or ability to provide, clients who are going to be employed in it. So it's a good problem to have. So we're not concerned about the business growing on par with, say the quote-unquote supply of potential trainees. We understand that it's going to grow much quicker probably if there's a real market opportunity. And then third, we're looking for a business investment that has a strong organizational culture and very positive, empowering environment, because I think what lacks a lot of in Cambodia, Vietnam, and Afghanistan are really good businesses with transparent leadership and processes and a focus on individuals and where they're going. I mean, I think there are things that in the U.S., at least, which is what I know, you have kind of leaders like Patagonia and Cliffwire and others, in Starbucks even as an example, that treat their employees well, that kind of understand how you balance running a business with bringing in different stakeholders. And I think that's sorely missing in Southeast Asia and Afghanistan. And so we're looking for those kinds of businesses that when a woman goes in who's still recovering from trauma, she's not going to be yelled at, her pay is not going to be withheld if she drops one coffee or something. You know, it has to be the kind of environment which is supportive and really gives them the opportunity to contribute and learn.
And when you are looking for partners, do you have like also a safety guidelines, like similar to the way you invest in a specific business?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we've, over the past few years, tried to get a little bit more specific on. In the past, again, we've been more opportunistic and in general had good results because we were able to make partnerships with really high-quality international businesses like, you know, Raffles and Intercontinental Hotel, as well as, you know, U.S. Embassy and various other embassies that are looking for staff or looking for other services that we provide. But similar along those lines, that we're looking for a business that is going to treat our clients well, has proper training systems in place. The worst case scenario is when we send one of our clients to business and she kind of feels lost. She doesn't feel like that anybody is actually providing her any real training or is, you know, actually facilitating her growth. And so we have much the same criteria. One area we struggle with, and I think any career services advisor, you know, career counselor anywhere in the world struggles with this, is kind of bridging the gap between what somebody wants to do and dreams to do with their current capacity and also the market. Because we have a lot of women who come through and say, well, I want to be a hairdresser, but the problem being that most hairdressing jobs are quite low paid. There's already too many hairdressers in Phnom Penh. And so you kind of have to be in the role of a parent where you might have to say, well, you know, it's probably not the right role for you. At the same time, you don't want to, you know, push them into something they don't want to do. And so it can be a little bit, it's a tricky game to manage, but it's not unique to our circumstance. I think any career counselor anywhere kind of grapples with, you know, what does somebody want to do versus where they're at today and what makes sense given their current circumstances.
But at the end, it's really about empowering people because you care about them, you train them, you try to rebuild their potential. It's really like about empowerment.
Yeah. And again, that's, I mean, I think our core goal is seeing that a woman starts at one of our businesses. I mean, and again, she might not even go through our business. She might be kind of at the point where she can put together her own CV and start going out there and find her own job, which is great. But 95% of women, that's not the case. And so my hope is that whether it's 3 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, after they leave Jomar Catering, they're pretty much able on their own to secure their own employment and provide for their family. And, you know, build up some savings. And so that's kind of the end goal for us, is that they've completed this, you know, cycle of rehabilitation. They have some really definite skills that they can earn income based off of that supports their living expenses and those of their dependents.
Okay, and I have a question from the community. You mentioned several times that you had like a lot of failures with the Hagar Foundation, Hagar organization. And can you give us some examples and what you learned from it?
Sure. So this is a picture of the soy milk factory in 2008. The next is a news article from the Cambodia Daily in 2009. So when I first joined Hagar in 2008, the financial crisis hit, and 2 of our businesses were really slammed by it, especially our garment business. The article here basically is saying that about between 150 to 200,000 workers in Cambodia working in the garment sector were laid off. It just destroyed the economy, and we were not immune to that. And I think one of the big things we learned through this exercise, we weren't, you know, again, being necessarily strategic. We were unfortunately reacting to what was a crisis within our businesses, was that over time we kind of lost sight of the why of what we're doing, and this is, you know, Simon Sinek's famous golden circle. We were very aware of what we were doing. We had a good sense of how, but we kind of lost sense of the purpose of it. And when you look at the way these businesses grew, it made sense in the early stage because they're solving a very specific need. But as they grew, we didn't necessarily take the time to reflect on how these businesses contributed to our overall social mission. So to give you a sense of that, our clients in the soy business in the early days were on average 40 years old. They were war widows with 2 to 3 dependents. They had very limited literacy and very unlikely to find a job anywhere in the private sector. And so what they really needed is any job that, kind of a manual labor job that allowed them to earn an income as soon as possible. As we scaled up the soy milk business into a proper Tetra Pak, manufacturing facility, it actually, if you're running it properly, you need very few jobs. There's a bunch of high-skilled jobs and then about, 100 or 50 or 100 low-skilled jobs. At the same time, we had much younger clients. They had a higher level of education, still quite low, but higher than older clients, and they were willing to take additional risks. And so it really didn't make sense in the soy milk business for us. I think it was our clients had changed. We hadn't really considered that as the business grew, so we weren't creating the kinds of training and employment opportunities for these kinds of women where it made sense. And so we're getting hurt on the bottom line because the business was struggling. But from a social mission perspective, it wasn't really accomplishing what we wanted to accomplish. And as you guys noted before, we were kind of running a conglomerate in, food and beverage, garments, water and sanitation at one point, solar, and all these things. And really, to run something that's effectively, you need a massive amount of investment in the holding company to actually, figure that out and to support them adequately. So I think the one thing we kind of stepped back and said, why are we doing this, and what are the different paths to achieving the social goal? And this crudely drawn, representation of that is here. And I think what we realized is that, we would prefer to move with joint ventures, invest in a business model that's already proven. We can do startups if the circumstance really warrants it, like Afghanistan, where there are very few opportunities for private sector engagements. But we prefer to use partnerships whenever possible. So if the Hilton is ready and willing and a good employer and a good trainer, we're very happy to partner with them to employ some of our clients. But the reality is usually our clients are going to have to move through one of our startups or a joint venture before they're ready to move into the wider private sector. Some other failures, I think the garment factory business had a lot of potential. It worked. Again, garment factory businesses, it's a very, you have one designer, you have 5, kind of like cutting departments who are a little bit more high skilled, and then you have a big array of relatively low skilled workers. So the ability to find career paths within that are pretty limited. So there's not many opportunities for career growth. So a woman will come in and she'll learn to sew pretty well, but she's going to kind of be stuck at that entry level until another position opens in one of those 6 areas, which is quite rare. Contrast that to our catering business or Joma business, where there's tons of career growth opportunities, whether it's in administration or within the different, within the bakery. There's numerous different levels of leadership as well as different areas of the bakery to work in. You have inventory, you have cafe, which has about 9 or 10 different levels of leadership and skills. And so there's many opportunities within that to grow. And then if you look at the private sector around that, once you've kind of gained a footing in hospitality, you can move into hotels, you can move into various forms of restaurants, low, mid-range, high-end. It really just makes much more sense. The water and sanitation business, I don't have. For us, it was, again, in the 2000, a very opportunistic thing to start. At one point, Hagar was one of the largest manufacturers of clean water filters in the world. We distributed about 400,000 or 500,000 in Cambodia. But again, it was something kind of driven by an opportunity from a donor. I believe it was UN related, to do this project because Hagar was known for having the capacity and having the capacity and the strong leadership and infrastructure to do it. So that was eventually commercialized, and it's called Hydrologic now. We decided not to move forward with that and invest in it just because, again, it's so far outside of our actual core of working with abused women. But it is a good social business opportunity. So I think it's not necessarily a failure, but I think it's kind of a reflection on our part that we really want to stick to developing our competencies around our core mission and not to, really divert from that whenever possible.
Okay,
all right. Well, thanks a lot, Tim, on giving us a really good insight in how you, with the Hagar Social Enterprise Group, are helping some of the most marginalized people in the world to find their path back into society again. To close up, can you very shortly tell us a little bit about how you ended up with Hagar and what your personal motivation was to get into this sector?
Sure. So when I was in university, every summer I managed to find my way to Southeast Asia. That would be through volunteer opportunities or through different projects. And when I was graduating, I was asked by an alumni of my university and a friend who was starting up a a social business called Peppy Tours, if I wanted to, move there and help her start it up. So I did, and I moved to Cambodia about a week after graduation, helped her start up the company, which had been going for about a few years, but they were looking to kind of scale up things. And on the weekends, I volunteered with a local Kiva affiliate called Credit, got involved with a number of different microfinance and social business startups, and kind of, networked my way into meeting the CEO of Hagar International, Talmadge. And Talmadge is a pretty amazing guy. He has a number of different personal social businesses he's running in Cambodia, in organic agriculture and low-income property development and other things. So I was kind of helping him with a number of those. At the same time, he's also the CEO of Hagar International. So he was, we kind of worked together a little bit, and he pulled me into Hagar. And at that time, we were going through these pretty massive challenges with two of our businesses failing, both financially but also from a social perspective. And so that was kind of my intro in. And one of my, I think what I found out through that experience is that I really love working with failure and change management. I think it's really exciting to me when something's not working and kind of going into a demoralized place. But, how do we bring everything together? How do we turn this around and make the most positive outcome? And so that's really been my experience at Hagar, is kind of working in this gray area between nonprofit and for-profit and government, and trying to build a consensus around it. So it's really what drives me and what I love to do, and I think that's what kind of makes Hagar unique. Is we're not a strictly for-profit or nonprofit model. We really kind of employ whatever tool makes sense to achieve our social mission.
It's really interesting, and one of our objectives, it's a presentation and with this conference, is really to connect people together. So we have a lot of business students actually following us or listening to us. Do you have any opportunities in the Hagar group that they can join you?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's always 10,000 opportunities. I just got back from a trip to Myanmar and Cambodia and Thailand for last month, and there's no shortage of opportunities for anybody who's really willing to be on the ground and has the right kind of grit and determination. I think besides Hagar, I can think of probably 5 different organizations who are looking for young leaders to kind of lead what they're putting together. They're kind of startup social enterprises in again, organic agriculture and property development, microfinance, and they really struggle to find leaders who can who are willing to do whatever it takes to help them grow and help them find their space in the market. And so my advice is always just save up a little bit of money, buy a plane flight and land, and volunteer until you find a job. And it's what I did. It's what a lot of my friends did, and it's a lot easier than you think. At Hagar ourselves, we're recruiting for a social enterprise director. It's a more senior position, somebody with 5 to 10 years already in impact investment, social enterprise, or business development. But we're trying to find that person. They'd be based in Phnom Penh, but overseeing all of our investments and partnerships and kind of the economic empowerment sphere of our work in Afghanistan, Cambodia, and Vietnam, and soon in Myanmar as we get started there. So that's one opportunity. We're always looking for, interns and for people who are willing to work on specific projects, whether it's, in Phnom Penh, Vietnam, or Afghanistan or remotely. And some of those are revolving around, more basic communication work. Others are research and mapping. And some, if there are universities or professors or students with professors who want to do some research kind of on our model and help us, help us do it better, we're open to that. We've done case studies with Harvard before, and we're working on one with Stanford. So we're eager to kind of open our books and receive some critical feedback so that we can make things better.
Okay, great. We'll make sure that we are going to advertise all the publications. So don't hesitate to send us any opportunities you might have.
Yeah, absolutely.